He saved her from the blizzard. But no one knew which of them truly needed saving. The storm came out of nowhere, a wall of white, swallowing the Montana plains whole. Somewhere in that endless frost, Elias Cole, a rancher who hadn't spoken to another soul in months, found her. A woman half buried in snow, lips blue, eyes barely open. He could have ridden on. No one would have blamed him. But he turned back. Something in her stillness called to the part of him that wasn't entirely dead. Inside his lonely cabin, the world fell silent except for the crackle of fire and the sound of her breathing, fragile, uncertain, alive. As the blizzard roared for days, two strangers shared warmth, words, and wounds neither dared reveal. She didn't speak of where she came from, and he didn't ask. But when she smiled through her pain, something in him cracked a wall he had spent years building against grief, guilt, and love. By the time the storm broke, the question wasn't whether she would survive, but whether he could bear to let her go. Some storms freeze the land, others melt the heart. And this one, it did both. The storm had swallowed the world whole. Snow pressed against the window like a white palm, and the cabin breathed in shallow wooden creaks. Elias Cole moved through the dim light with the care of a man who knew how easily life slipped away. He had carried the stranger in from the drift. Mae Ellison, she'd whispered, the name barely warm enough to hold. Now her cloak steamed by the hearth, her boots set near the fire, as if the heat could teach them to live again. The room was small and plain, a table rubbed smooth by years of silence, a rifle above the door, a kettle muttering on the hook. Pine resin sweetened the air. Outside, the wind clawed at the eaves like something hungry. Elias ladled broth into a tin cup and knelt beside her. She looked like every soft thing this land tried to kill, face white as milk, lashes stuck with ice, a threadbare ribbon hidden in her fist. He coaxed a sip past her lips and felt the old ache rise, the one he kept nailed under his ribs. He had done this before, in another winter, for a woman whose laugh still lived in the cracks of these walls. Memory struck and he stood too fast, forcing breath back into his chest. Mae stirred, a sound hardly larger than a moth. Her eyes opened green, startled, stubbornly alive. For a moment neither spoke. The fire snapped. The kettle sighed. Between them stretched a narrow bridge of heat, fragile and necessary, and the knowledge unwelcome, undeniable, that the storm outside was not the only one that would have to be survived. When Mae woke, the world was quiet, too quiet. For a heartbeat, she thought she was dead. Then the ache in her body reminded her she wasn't that lucky. Her eyes found the ceiling wood, rough and low, and the faint glow of firelight. She turned her head and saw him. The man sat in the corner, sharpening a knife, his expression carved from stone. His shirt sleeves were rolled, forearms scarred and steady. He looked up just once, and that glance told her everything. He didn't trust her, didn't want her there, but he wasn't cruel. Not yet. "You should rest," he said, voice deep, quiet as thunder far away. "Where am I?" she managed. "Cole Ranch. The blizzard still got its teeth out. You'll leave when it's done." Something in the way he said when felt uncertain, as if neither of them truly believed the storm would ever end. Mae pushed herself up, wincing. "Thank you, for saving me." "Red." He gave no reply, only set the knife down, stood, and added another log to the fire. Sparks rose, tiny suns against the dark. For the next hours, silence lived between them. But in that silence, something began to shift, not comfort, not yet, but a fragile curiosity. Outside, the wind howled like a warning. Inside, two people who had sworn off the world began to feel it creeping back in. The storm howled like a living thing that refused to die. Elias Cole set the knife aside, pulled the blanket up to Mae's chin, and stepped away from the fire, as if burned by something far older than flame. He didn't know why he looked back, only that her half-awake eyes, glassy with fever and fear, followed him all the way to the door. Outside, the wind clawed at the cabin like wolves. Inside, ghosts whispered between the walls. By morning, the world was pale and cruel. Mae awoke to the smell of pine tea and the sound of wood shifting under the cold. Elias was already there, steady as ever, pouring the steaming drink into a dented tin cup. No greeting, no softness, only the quiet precision of a man who saved lives before, but never knew how to keep them. "You should drink," he said. "Where am I?" she rasped. "Cole Ranch. You'll leave when the road clears." He didn't say if he said when, though both knew the storm wasn't done. Mae nodded and reached for the cup. "Thank you. For saving me." He didn't answer. Just turned away, feeding another log into the fire. Sparks leapt, casting gold against the scar on his jaw. Hours stretched into silence. Mae began to move about, washing the cup, folding blankets, mending a torn sleeve. Elias wanted to stop her, but the rhythm of her small tasks filled the cabin with something dangerously close to life. When her sleeve slid back, he saw old bruises on her wrist. He didn't ask. He knew the look of people who had survived things worse than winter. That night, the wind screamed again. Mae sat by the fire, tracing a verse in her worn Bible. Elias watched from the shadows. "You believe in him?" he asked. "I believe in what keeps a person standing," she said. "But I doubt God walks through storms like this. Some places," he murmured, "he doesn't bother to visit." 3 days passed. The storm broke, then returned crueler, louder. On the 4th day, tracks appeared in the snow. Not wolf prints. Wagon wheels. Human. Elias's stomach tightened. He loaded his rifle and glanced at Mae. "Stay inside. Lock the door." "What about you?" "I'll talk." The man who approached wore a cracked hat and a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Hell of a storm," he drawled. "Mind sharing some fire and bread?" "You can have the fire," Elias said, blocking the door. "But your gun stays out." The grin widened, then twisted. "Hospitality's dead out here, huh?" Elias's jaw tightened. Behind him, Mae stood motionless, shadowed by the lantern light. The stranger's gaze flicked past. Elias saw her. Hunger, not for food, flashed in his eyes. Everything happened at once. The man feigned surrender, jerked his gun up. Elias swung. The shot went wild, splintering the doorframe. Mae gasped as wood cut her cheek. Elias tackled the man into the snow, the two rolling, snarling, the storm swallowing their struggle. A knife flashed. Elias caught the wrist steel inches from his throat. Mae moved before she thought. She grabbed the boiling kettle from the fire and hurled it. Steam exploded. The man screamed, dropped the blade. Elias struck once, clean and final. The man staggered, fell, then crawled away into the white, cursing. Inside, silence returned like a held breath. Elias shut the door and leaned against it. "You hurt?" "Just a scratch," Mae said, touching her cheek. He looked a streak of red on her pale skin. His hand rose, hesitated, fell. "Sorry." Mae smiled faintly. "Next time, let me throw the kettle sooner." A laugh escaped him, quick, startled, almost human. Later, she bandaged his hand. He wrapped her wrist. Words weren't needed. The firelight softened everything, even him. "Who are those men?" she asked. "Not anyone you need to know," he said. "Someone from my past," she whispered. "And I'm not going back." Elias met her eyes. "Then you won't." Days bled together. The storm eased, then froze again. They worked side by side, feeding horses, mending fences, chopping wood. Each task, a thread pulling them closer. One afternoon, the sky cleared for the first time in weeks. Mae stood on the porch, sunlight breaking across her face. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "Tomorrow the road will open. I can leave, can't I?" Elias wanted to say yes. He wanted to keep his word, to stay the man who promised nothing, felt nothing. But the word caught in his throat, melting before it reached the air. "When the road clears," he said, "not before." She nodded, eyes distant. "And if it does clear?" He hesitated. "Then it's your choice." She smiled just barely. "Maybe I'll stay another day." That night, as the fire died low, Elias whispered, almost to himself, "No one gets left outside in the storm. Not anymore." Low. Mae turned toward him, her voice quiet as falling snow. "Even if the storm's inside?" He met her eyes and didn't look away. "Especially then." Outside, the wind finally rested. Inside, the fire burned steady, two souls thawing, one slow heartbeat at a time. Morning broke with a silence so deep it felt wrong. The sky was white, too bright, the kind that hides danger beneath its calm. Elias stood on the porch, scanning the horizon. The storm had finally loosened its grip on the mountains, leaving behind a world clean, glittering, and hollow. Mae stepped beside him, her coat wrapped tight, the ends of her hair still damp from washing. For the first time since he'd found her, her face held color again. "It's over," she said softly. Elias didn't answer. His gut said otherwise. Storms this cruel never ended clean. He went to check the fence line, leaving Mae in the cabin. She watched from the doorway, fingers brushing the faded ribbon in her pocket, her one piece of home, her last thread of the life she'd run from. The snow swallowed his figure, and for a long while she heard only the sound of wind, then nothing at all. When she turned back, she saw it. Boot prints near the barn. Fresh, too fresh. Her heart dropped. A shadow moved inside the stable, not Elias's. "Elias," she cried. But the wind snatched her voice. Two men emerged, ragged and mean, the kind who didn't fear the cold because they carried something worse inside. One she recognized the man from before, his hand bandaged, his pride bleeding beneath the cloth. His grin was cracked like dry earth. "Look what the storm blew back," he said. "The lady who thought she could vanish." Mae stepped back, palms trembling. "You should leave. He'll be back any moment." "Oh, we're counting on it," the man sneered. "We owe your cowboy a talk." They dragged her toward the barn, and when she struggled, the one-eyed brute beside him struck her across the mouth. The world tilted. She hit the snow hard, tasting iron. By the time Elias returned, the porch door was open, and the quiet he had feared was waiting for him. He dropped the tools, heart pounding. Tracks, boots, blood. The world shrank to a single pulse of rage. He followed the trail to the barn. Inside, Mae was tied to a post, the men circling her like scavengers. "I said she was mine," the bandaged one hissed. "You just kept her warm for me." Elias stepped from the doorway, shotgun leveled. "You made a mistake coming back." The smaller man laughed. "You think you scare us? 2 men against 1 old rancher?" "2 dead men," Elias said. The first shot tore through the air, splitting the stillness like a crack in glass. The recoil slammed into his shoulder, but he didn't flinch. The brute fell backward into the hay, a bloom of red soaking through white frost. The second man dove behind a beam, firing wildly. The barn filled with smoke, dust, and curses. Elias moved slow, measured a predator of habit. A bullet clipped his arm. He gritted his teeth, fired back. Silence, only the moan of wind through the broken boards. Then footsteps. Behind him. He turned too late. The bandaged man, not dead, not yet, swung the butt of his revolver across Elias's face. Pain exploded. He hit the ground, snow rushing up to meet him. The world blurred, wood, hay, blood. Mae screamed his name, twisting against the rope until it cut her wrists raw. "You should have left when you had the chance," the man growled, pressing the barrel of his gun to Elias's chest. "But you just had to play hero." Elias's voice came low, thick with blood. "You don't know what kind of man I used to be." The gun cocked. Mae, desperate, threw herself sideways, knocking over a lantern. Flames leapt, hungry and fast. The man cursed, turned his gun toward her. That instant was all Elias needed. He lunged, both men crashed into the dirt as fire crawled up the hay walls. The revolver went off once, then twice. The man's scream was swallowed by the blaze. Elias dragged Mae free, cutting her bonds with shaking hands. The heat roared around them. The roof sagged. "Come on," he said, voice hoarse. They stumbled into the snow, coughing, falling. The barn behind them burned like a funeral pyre. Elias collapsed to one knee, blood staining the snow dark. Mae caught him, pressing her hands over the wound in his side. "Don't you dare," she whispered, tears freezing on her cheeks. "You don't get to save me twice and not let me save you once." He tried to speak, but she shushed him. "Don't, just breathe. You're safe." He gave a weak laugh. "That's what I told you." By dawn, the barn was gone, ash and smoke twisting into the sky. Mae dragged Elias inside, bound his wound with torn linen, and stayed beside him through the night. Every few minutes, she checked his breathing. When he groaned, she smiled through her tears. "Good," she murmured. "Stay angry. It means you're alive." Hours passed. The wind softened. When his eyes finally opened, he found her asleep at his side, her hand still clutching his. For the first time in years, he felt warmth that wasn't fire. "Mae," he whispered. She stirred. "You're awake." "Barely," he said. "You should have run." "And leave you?" Her eyes filled again. "No, I'm done running." Outside, the first light of morning touched the ashes. Smoke rose in soft gray ribbons curling toward the hills. The storm was over for good this time, at least the one outside. Elias's voice broke the silence. "When I found you, I thought I was saving a stranger. Though," Mae smiled faintly, "you were saving yourself." He nodded once, too tired to argue. She reached out, brushing the ash from his face, her voice trembling with something like prayer. "You've lost enough to fire, Elias. Maybe it's time to let one keep you warm." He didn't answer, but his hand found hers, and this time, he didn't let go. The snow around the cabin began to melt. The first drops of water dripped from the eaves, soft as forgiveness. Somewhere in that sound, the quiet thaw of the world, something else began to melt too. Days passed before Elias could stand again. The wound along his ribs healed slowly, the scar sealing like a reminder carved by fire and snow. Mae refused to leave his side, cooking, feeding, scolding, smiling through exhaustion. She moved through the cabin as if she had always belonged there, and maybe, in some way, she had. Outside, the last of the ice began to break apart, sliding down the eaves in bright ribbons. The earth beneath the snow drank greedily, starved for warmth. Inside, the silence between them had changed. It was no longer empty, it breathed. Elias sat by the window, the light soft on his face. He watched Mae hanging their washed clothes on a line strung between two pine posts. The wind caught her hair, scattering it across her cheeks. She laughed quietly, but real. The sound hit him like the first sun after a long night. When she came back in, she found him still staring. "You're supposed to be resting," she said, setting down the kettle. "I am," he murmured. "I just didn't realize how much peace looked like you." Mae froze. Then, softly, "Don't say things you don't mean." "I mean every word," Elias said. "You came out of the storm, Mae, and I swear it hasn't stopped thawing since." She turned away, blinking fast, her throat tight. "You don't know me," she whispered. "Not really." "I know enough," he said. "I know you're stronger than anyone I've met. I know you saved my life. And I know I don't want this house to be quiet without you in it." Mae looked up, eyes bright in the firelight. "And what happens when the next storm comes?" Elias smiled, the kind that carried both pain and peace. "Then we face it together." They stood like that for a long moment, two people who had walked through the worst kind of cold and somehow found warmth at the end. Outside, the sun slipped over the horizon, painting the mountains gold. The melted snow gleamed like glass across the valley. That evening, they buried what was left of the men who had come for her, a small mound of frozen earth under the trees. Mae said nothing. Elias didn't offer forgiveness, only quiet respect for the dead and the living who had survived them. When they turned back, the cabin looked different. Not just a shelter anymore, but a place made by choice. Spring arrived with the suddenness. Only the frontier could manage wildflowers pushing through ice, rivers breaking free, birds returning like old friends. Mae planted seeds near the porch, her hands dark with soil. Elias built her a bench from what was left of the barn. Every evening they sat there, watching the sun slip behind the ridge. One night, as dusk settled and the first stars blinked awake, Mae spoke softly. "You once told me God doesn't come to storms like this." He nodded. "I think he did," she said. "He just came wearing your face." Elias's throat tightened. He reached for her hand. "Maybe he came wearing yours." The wind swept through the pines, gentle now, no longer a warning, but a hymn. Mae leaned her head against his shoulder. The air smelled of pine, smoke, and thawing earth. For the first time in years, Elias didn't feel haunted by the past. The ghosts were quiet now, replaced by something alive. "You ever wonder," Mae whispered, "why you found me out there?" Elias thought for a long time. "Maybe you weren't the one lost." She smiled, eyes closing as the fire crackled inside. "Maybe neither of us are anymore." The night deepened around them, calm and endless. The snow on the mountaintops glowed silver in the moonlight, the last traces of winter clinging to the high places. And inside that small cabin, where a man once swore he'd never feel again, the fire burned steady and low, not the blaze that destroys, but the kind that keeps you alive. By the time summer reached the Montana plains, the story of that blizzard had already become a whisper among the scattered ranches about a man who lived alone through the worst winter anyone could remember, and the stranger he pulled from the snow. Some said she was a runaway, others said an angel. No one really knew, but those who passed by Cole Ranch months later saw smoke rising steady from the chimney and flowers blooming along the fence line, and they didn't ask questions. Inside, life had taken on a quiet rhythm. Elias mended saddles again. Mae kept a small garden, and laughter real. Ordinary laughter found its way into the corners of the cabin that had forgotten what it sounded like. Sometimes, she would hum while cooking, and he would pause just to listen, pretending to check the fire. The ghosts no longer visited him at night. Or maybe they still did, but they stood at the door and smiled before fading with the dawn. The woman who once feared every sound of wind now opened the window to let the breeze in, and when the storms rolled across the far mountains again, neither of them reached for the door to bar it shut. They simply sat closer, let the thunder pass, and waited for the light that always followed. One evening, long after the snow had melted from the high peaks, Mae asked, "Do you ever think about that night?" "Every day," Elias said. "Would you still have stopped?" He looked at her, a smile ghosting across the lines of his face. "I don't think I ever had a choice." Outside, the wind carried the scent of rain and wild sage. The horizon blushed with sunset, the color of renewal. It said the harshest winters shape the gentlest hearts. And though no one could recall exactly when the last snow fell that year, everyone remembered how long the warmth stayed after. Because sometimes, the fiercest storms don't end when the clouds break, they end when two people decide to stand in the same light and let themselves be thawed. And so the fire inside the little cabin on Cole Ranch never went out again. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, it really helps the channel grow. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you won't miss the next Western love story. And tell us in the comments, what moment touched your heart the most? Your words keep this trail alive.